Hello, I'm Russell Haythorne with Denver 7, and welcome to Denver Decides. This community partnership is dedicated to accessible and transparent elections. The partnership includes the League of Women Voters of Denver, Inter-Neighborhood Cooperation, and is presented by Denver 8 TV. Our mission today is to present a ballot issue forum in anticipation of the general election coming up on Tuesday, November 5th. On this year's ballot is Proposition 131. Proposition 131 asks voters, shall there be a change to the Colorado revised statutes creating new election processes for certain federal and state offices and creating a new all-candidate primary election and allowing voters to vote for any one candidate per office regardless of the voter's or candidate's political party affiliation, providing that the four candidates for each office who receive the most votes advance to the general election, and in the general election allowing voters to rank candidates for each office on their ballot, and adopting a process for how the ranked votes are tallied and determining the winner to be the candidate with the highest number of votes in the final tally. Our format for this forum will follow a basic debate outline with opening and closing statements, rebuttals, cross-examination, and will include responses to questions submitted by our forum organizers. Let's begin by meeting the participants who will discuss the pros and cons of Proposition 131. Beginning at my right is Ted Trimpa with Voter First. He will be speaking in favor of Proposition 131, and Ted is an advisor on this proposition. And on my left is Jason Lupo with First Choice Counts. He will be speaking against Proposition 131. Welcome to both of you. We will begin with 1 minute opening remarks from both speakers. And Ted, you will be speaking first. You have 1 minute to offer your opening statement on Proposition 131. Thanks for being here.
First, I want to thank Channel 8 and the sponsors of this event for giving us an opportunity to talk about 131. Vote yes on 131. Elections should belong to the people, not political parties and not political insiders. Every voter, every one of us, should be able to vote for any candidate of any party in any election, particularly those because they're all taxpayer funded. And whoever wins the majority of votes in the general election should be the one that's going to win. But today, that's not how it works. There's a slimmer and slimmer portion of parties that make choices for us, that determines who's going to be on the ballot. And even worse, the majority winner doesn't have to get the majority of votes. This isn't right. This needs to stop. Extremism needs to stop. So we're asking you to vote yes on 131.
Ted, we appreciate your opening statement. And now, Jason, it is your opportunity to offer an opening statement, and you also have 1 minute.
Ranked choice voting is a convoluted process. It's so convoluted, and it can't be explained in such an easy fashion that the proponents of this measure and of this proposition fail to even attempt to describe what ranked choice voting is and how this is going to work on your primary and your general ballot. This is a convoluted process that has been tried in multiple jurisdictions around the country, only to have more than 75% of those jurisdictions then repeal ranked choice voting from their laws. It's seen 6 states decide to ban ranked choice voting. This is a methodology that has not been tried and tested in a scope or size of what they're trying to do in Colorado. Every place that this has been tested before does not match the extensive nature of Colorado's population and their election systems. This is a terrible plan that will make Coloradans lab rats for this new methodology of voting that has seen failures in every place that it's been tried.
Jason, thank you for that. Ted, again, thank you for your opening statement. We're now moving on to the rebuttal portion of this debate. And Jason, you will go first. You heard Ted's opening statement. You have 1 minute to offer a rebuttal.
The elections do belong to the people, and they currently belong to the people. We've seen that these elections, the way that they're currently operating, has worked in a fashion that has chosen candidates that represent the people and represented them well. And we've seen through the course of this last primary in June that what the proponents of this measure are trying to claim is that we have these far left and far right extremists that are being chosen in the primary. We saw the opposite in June. We saw two of the most left kind of liberal candidates be eliminated from their position, Stephanie Epps, Timothy Hernandez. And we saw on the right-hand side, on the Republican side, that almost every candidate that the GOP had endorsed that were more conservative in nature, majority of them lost their races. The system that we presently have is not producing these far left and far right extremists, which the proponents of these measures are claiming.
Thank you, Jason. And now, Ted, you have 1 minute to offer a rebuttal to Jason's opening statements.
First, when we talk about far left, far right, all you have to do is go to the state capitol. All you have to do is go to a central committee meeting of the Republican Party. It's a two-word response, Dave Williams. Talk about far right. What's happening today is extremes, the slimmer portions of the party are determining and making choices for us as to who we elect today. To the point of all these jurisdictions repealed ranked choice voting. What he's talking about is, yes, there were jurisdictions that repealed ranked choice voting, and a lot of those jurisdictions were in the 40s and 50s. And why? Because, oh my goodness, ranked choice voting started to elect black people. They were on the city council. They were on, local boards. And so all of a sudden the white establishment said, oh, we can't have this, so they repealed it. And when you say no scope or size, over 60 jurisdictions, Alaska and Maine, have instituted and used ranked choice voting. To say that it hasn't been tested out is totally false.
Thank you for your rebuttal. We are now moving on to the cross-examination portion of this debate. And in round one, Mr. Trimpa, you will be allowed to ask Mr. Lupo a question, and Mr. Lupo will have 1 minute to respond. So, Ted, it is your turn to ask a question of Jason.
So nearly half of the voters are registered unaffiliated, almost 50% in the state of Colorado. Why shouldn't they, along with Republicans and Democrats, be allowed to vote for any candidate of any party in a taxpayer-funded election?
Jason?
This is a stat that has been boosted and bumped up from motor vehicle registrations. Now that we are registering people to vote at the same time, they have action at the DMV. If they do not know what party they're going to side with, they're automatically put as unaffiliated. And we've seen this happen countless times where we have numerous people that are registered to vote as unaffiliated that will never even turn in a ballot. I mean, you need the stats of the people that are actually turning in these ballots, and it's not 50%. The voters that actually vote, it does not equal 50% of unaffiliated in these races.
Jason, thank you for that response. And now, Jason, you have the opportunity to ask a question of Ted, and Ted will have 1 minute to respond.
The further that you dive into ranked choice voting and the system that's in place, the more you get to understand how much you don't understand. What we want to know at this point is, number one, if you can let us know how many clerk and recorders are in the state of Colorado and what their role would be on election night if ranked choice voting were to pass.
So ranked choice voting is a responsibility, and elections are the responsibility of each of the county clerks. And we've been working with them. We have promised resources, whatever they need, training in order to implement the all-candidate primary and then the final four for the general election. There is no evidence that this is not that the system is not capable of instituting and computing what ranked choice voting would be. For example, all the voting machines in except 3 counties already have the software to do ranked choice voting. You'll be able to get reports relatively quickly. Of the remaining 3, 2, they're getting the software done now. And then 1 counts them by hand. And that's the only one we would have to worry about. So they're trying to fearmonger by saying that this can't happen, that there are going to be all these difficulties that are going to occur at the night of calculating the election, and that just isn't the case. And all you have to do is look at the 60 jurisdictions that have instituted this, and to look at Alaska, and to look at Maine.
And now, Ted, you have an opportunity to ask Jason a question, and Jason will have 1 minute to respond.
So Dave Williams, the current chair of the Republican Party, and the Colorado GOP endorsed a number of candidates in the Republican primary. 14 of the 18 lost. Is it possible that Williams and the Colorado GOP are out of touch with Colorado, but also the Republican Party?
Let's put it this way. I was one of those candidates endorsed by the GOP that lost. And if you look at the candidates that lost in those races, it's hard to tell whether or not the GOP was out of touch or whether the amount of money that were poured into these races is what was the determining factor. I mean, when you have 10, 12 mailers going out for one candidate and 1 or 2 mailers going out for another candidate and is heavily outspent, is that really being out of touch with the constituents of that region, or is that where money dictates what's going on? Which we've seen that money is dictating these races, and it's only going to get worse. When you have a primary ballot with 48 candidates on it, like Alaska did, which, by the way, Alaska is attempting to repeal this, and probably will. It hasn't worked. Maine has a spoiled ballot rate of upwards of 11%. Alaska had a spoiled ballots of 11%. When you are tossing out that many ballots, how can you call that democracy?
Thank you, Jason, for that response. Let's continue with our cross-examination. And now, Jason, it is your turn to ask Ted another question, and Ted will have 1 minute to respond.
There are 64 clerk and recorders in this state. 64 checks and balances for our election systems. Of those elections that are taking place, multiple of these elections are statewide and they're multi-county races. If you haven't done the math, I'll do it for you. There are 64 different ways to fill out a ballot in a ranked order 1 through 4. That is if the ballot is filled out correctly. Not counting somebody that marks 2 number 2s or 2 number 3s. If it's filled out correctly, there's 64 different ways. Right now, we have a checks and balances system where the clerk and recorder on election night shares the results of what has taken place in their county. This is not going to be possible with ranked choice voting. What are they going to do? Tell the entire people of El Paso County or Denver County all 64 results of every single race that's been run? It is not feasible to have transparency and auditability in these types of elections. Maine has 1.4 million people. Colorado has close to 6 million people.
Jason, can we have your question?
So once again, I'll ask, what is the role of the clerk and recorder on election night, and how do we tabulate these votes in a way that is transparent in Colorado?
As I said earlier, the software already exists for all these counties in order to calculate it. What he's doing is fear-mongering and making it sound like all these county clerks are going to be running around counting ballots by hand, wondering what's going, checking it off. There are built-in audit systems for this. There's built-in software for this. There's transparency for it, and this has been used across the country, again, in 60 jurisdictions and Alaska and Maine. And his facts around spoiled ballots and what was going on in Alaska just isn't true. It was, first of all, one, people liked the system over 80%. It had a 98% accuracy in terms of what the ballots were. And 3, Maine has had this system for a number of years. If it is so bad, if the spoilage is so bad, then why aren't they repealing it? The reason why they're not repealing it is because it works. It represents what we're supposed to be representing, and that is voters. Elections belong to voters, not political parties and not political insiders.
Gentlemen, moving on to the third and final round of cross-examination. And Ted, you have the opportunity to ask Jason another question, and Jason will have 1 minute to respond.
So George Washington warned us, and when he was leaving, of the possible corrosive power of political parties. What do you think he would say about the extremism and partisanship that we see today?
Jason.
So once again, you never answered my question. And so I'm going to go back to this. What is going to take place and what is going to transpire, and this is not fear-mongering. At the end of the day, our elections should be transparent. We should be able to audit them. We should be able to know the results on election night. This is not about an accusation that county clerk and recorders are going to have to hand count these ballots. This is a problem of the fact that one county in a multi-county or a statewide race cannot produce any sort of feasible election results to the general public, and there's no checks and balances because all of that data needs to be used from multiple counties in order to determine the winner by ranked choice. El Paso County cannot determine one winner. When they're sharing a district with Douglas County, they need both results. They have to be combined. So once again, how and what is the role of the clerk and recorder on election night?
Jason, thank you for that response. You actually have one more question in this cross-examination, or was that the question? You have one final turn to ask a question of Ted.
Let's put it this way. We have a situation where we're going to have tons of counties putting together results with 1,000 different possibilities per race, all going to a central location to be tabulated. Now, in Alameda, California, when they introduced ranked choice voting, they had a programming glitch that certified the wrong election winner, and it wasn't until months later that they found out who was the true winner. You take a small school board race like Alameda, California, and compare it to the state of Colorado when we're choosing a governorship. How do we ensure that we're not going to have programming glitches at some sort of step along the way?
Jason, thanks for the question.
The response to this is simple. It worked in Alaska, it worked in Maine, and they had to calculate votes from all across the state. What this is, and I'll say it again, is just fear-mongering, saying that this isn't possible when the software and the ability and the experience exists. They're just trying to create issues when there aren't issues. And again, look at Alaska, look at Maine. It worked there, it can work here.
Thank you, Ted, and thank you, Jason. We're now moving on to the portion of our debate where you, as speakers, will respond to questions submitted by our forum organizers. Each speaker will have 1 minute to answer each question, and you'll each answer the question. So Jason, who is speaking against Proposition 131, will be our first speaker. Jason, here is the first question. Is there a world where you see both benefits and drawbacks of combining open primaries and ranked choice voting?
No, I think at the end of the day, we have to make sure that every voter's views are represented in the general election, which they will not be. There's a good chance that in a lot of these districts that there will not be a representative from the Republican or the Democrat side on the ballot. It all comes down to how many candidates are in this primary, how many of them are splitting the vote. We honestly don't know what is going to happen in some of these races, when really at the end of the day, we know from who is in that demographics of those areas who should be representing those people from past history. We know that we have heavy Republican areas. We know that we have heavy Democrat areas. What this is attempting to do is silence the voice of the people that do not fit this moderate centrist mentality on both sides. There's a reason why the Democrats don't want this, and there's a reason why the Republicans don't want this. Because we are going to eliminate the viewpoints that matter in this state for our constituency.
Jason, thank you for that. Ted, you'll get the same question. Do you see a world where there are both benefits and drawbacks of combining open primaries and ranked choice voting? And you have 1 minute.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is something that needs to be done because remember, elections belong to voters, not political parties and not political insiders. And when 23% is the turnout in primaries and they're the ones that are determining, choosing for us who the candidates are going to be on that general election ballot, you're not getting represented. We voters are not having choice. And the only way we can address that is by having an open primary, all candidate, one ballot. There still hasn't been an answer as to why you wouldn't want to have every voter be able to vote for any candidate of any party in any taxpayer-funded election. What you're hearing from the No on 131 is basically the parties can do it. We can solve it. This is what it's about. We represent the people. Well, if they do, then why does half the electorate register as unaffiliated? Why do you poll as to what people want? Look at 80% of youth don't believe parties represent them.
Ted, thank you for that. Moving on to question 2, submitted by our forum organizers, and Ted, you'll go first. If the proposition is passed, describe the impact that well-funded campaigns will have on the process.
Well, it's like any system. The way voters win is by making sure that the elections are about them and not about political parties and not about political insiders. Money's always going to be affecting elections, whether you like it or not. That's the reality of what's happening today. And how do you deal with that? Is you have transparency. And the way you have transparency is make sure that everybody is on one primary ballot. Any person can vote for any candidate for any party in that taxpayer-funded election. And then, most importantly, you make sure that the top four then go into the general election, and the one who gets the majority of votes, the highest number of rankings, is the one that wins. It's a really simple process, and it's about you and not about political parties and not about political insiders.
Ted, thank you. Jason, your turn to answer that question. If the proposition passes, describe the impact well-funded campaigns might have on the process.
Political parties are not the ones that are influencing these races with loads of money. Dark money sources, PACs, are influencing these races. And they are going to put in place and spend money on the candidates that they know will represent their special interests, their lobbying, all of the things that they want passed up in the legislature. This idea that all of a sudden the parties are the ones that are funding these races is absurd. Go on Tracer. You can find out who's funding these races. You can find out who's throwing money into these races. All of these races are being dictated by special interest groups. This is not a party problem. This is not a situation where we have a party problem. If we had a party problem, you would see a much more diverse state legislature, which we don't. We have a legislature that is pretty moderate, pretty centrist in a lot of fashions, with few exceptions when it comes to the Republican side. And the ones that are on the left that are pushing some of the social agenda, they will be eliminated from this process too. Anybody that's fighting for environmentalism, anybody that's fighting for abortion, anybody that's fighting for gun control, anybody that's fighting for freedom to bear arms, all of those fringe viewpoints will be shut down in this system.
Jason, thank you for that. Moving on to question 3, submitted by forum organizers. And Jason, you'll take this one first. If Proposition 131 passes, how will these changes affect voter engagement?
Let me tell you this, because I think this is really important. There is a huge issue with the fiscal note of this bill, or of this initiative. We know from talking to several clerk and recorders that they believe that this will cost their counties close to $20 million to implement. Money that could be going to make our roads safer, make our neighborhoods safer. We know, because Kent Thiry said so in an interview, that Polis has promised millions of dollars to the rollout of this initiative. Money that is not seen in this fiscal report. And he said it in an interview. We know that this proposition to put ranked choice voting into play is going to cost more than what the proponents of this measure are telling you that this is going to cost Colorado taxpayers. And if this works so well, once again, why has 80% and more of the jurisdictions that tried ranked choice voting repealed this?
Jason, thank you for that. Ted, same question. If Proposition 131 passes, how will these changes affect voter engagement?
Voter engagement will go up. Statistics show that when you look at Gen Z, 80% of them feel like neither party represents who they are. 95% of them think that we should have all candidate primaries. If we want to engage voters in this country, if we want to engage voters in the state of Colorado, we have to change what the system is, because right now it's a slim portion of what is happening that's determining what our choices are going to be. Now, regarding costs, this is just pontification, drawing stuff from the sky. These numbers are clear. Yes, this will cost some money. Yes, the money will be found. Yes, Governor Polis has said they're going to set aside money for it. No, it's not going to cost $20 million. We have to be realistic about this. It's the same thing when they say 80% of the jurisdictions overturned it. Well, yeah, a lot of the jurisdictions overturned it because it turned out the white power didn't like the fact that minority counties candidates were getting elected.
Ted, thank you for that. Jason, thank you for your response. One final question in this round submitted by the forum organizers, and Ted, you'll go first. Will this proposition increase the behind-the-scenes discussions among political party elites to limit competition and thus voter evaluation of candidates?
No, because you're going to have increased participation by more voters. What hopefully this will do is encourage political parties to start looking at their internal processes. Think about what the Republican Party has been talking about doing in Colorado. They've been talking about getting rid of primaries. Dave Williams, the chair of the Republican Party, has already tried it once. He will try it again. And the only way we can stop them from doing these kinds of things and taking away our right to vote is to change how the system works. The parties are not going to fix themselves. So will it encourage them to have conversations? We hope so. And they should keep having conversations because half the state isn't registered with their party and don't feel like that they affiliate with what these parties are representing.
Ted, thank you for that. Jason, same question. Will this proposition increase the behind-the-scenes discussions among political party elites to limit competition and thus voter evaluation of candidates? And you have 1 minute.
I think that it's absurd to believe that 85% of these jurisdictions, over 75%, have eliminated ranked choice voting because of some race issue. It's not happening. It's not taking place. If you want to pontificate, pull things out of the sky, we are telling you what the primary funder of this measure said in an interview, that this is going to cost a ton of money, that Polis has already dedicated or has promised to put millions of dollars into the rollout of this measure. And it is not in this blue book. How much this is going to cost is underestimated in this blue book, and it's going to cost taxpayers a lot of money. And with the amount of jurisdictions that have removed this process, it is going to cost millions more to reinstate our previous system, the system we currently have, after ranked choice voting fails to do what it promises to do.
Gentlemen, we appreciate the healthy debate here. We are moving on to closing arguments. That brings us to the end of our question and answer segment, and we are now ready for your closing statements. Each speaker will have 1 minute for a closing statement, and we will reverse the order of opening statements, which means, Jason Lupo, you begin, and you have 1 minute to offer your closing argument.
This is a system that, although is claimed to be tried and true, has seen so many issues in its rollout in so many places. And it's had so many jurisdictions repeal this measure just a couple years after they put it in place. We've seen states that have full out banned it after seeing the issues that have taken place. We have county clerk and recorders that have told members of the public, their constituency, that they do not in fact have the software and the hardware that's required for this, that they would need an upgrade that would cost county taxpayers millions of dollars. We know that there's an issue with chain of custody of these results. We know that there's an issue with the transparency of these results. All of this is going to take place in a centralized tabulation system, not at the county level. He would not answer the question what the role of the county clerks are on election night, because they no longer will have that role.
Jason, thank you very much for that closing statement. And now, Ted Trimpa, you have 1 minute to offer your closing argument.
Let's remember, elections belong to the people, not political parties, not political insiders. We all should have the ability in one primary ballot to vote for any candidate we want of any party, particularly when these are taxpayer-funded elections. When he says that all of a sudden all these jurisdictions repealed it, it simply just isn't the case. The ones that repealed it were what I talked about earlier. When he talks about states banning it, yes, it's Republican states banning it because parties don't like the fact that ranked choice voting actually empower, and open primaries actually empower the people, the voters, you. In terms of transparency and how this is going to be conducted, I have faith in our county clerks. We have faith in our county clerks. They did all-mail ballot. They did automatic voter registration. They did vote centers. And all that came off without a hitch. And how did they do it? Because we have some of the best county clerks in the country, and we have every confidence that they can do that here too.
Ted, thank you for that closing argument. Again, Jason, thank you for yours. And we'd like to thank both of you on behalf of the forum organizers for your participation in this forum this evening. Again, Proposition 131 asks voters, shall there be a change to the Colorado revised statutes creating new election processes for certain federal and state offices and creating a new all-candidate primary election and allowing voters to vote for any one candidate per office regardless of the voter's or candidate's political party affiliation, providing that the 4 candidates for each office who receive the most votes advance to the general election, and in the general election allowing voters to rank candidates for each office on their ballot, and adopting a process for how the ranked votes are tallied and determining the winner to be the candidate with the highest number of votes in the final tally. Our thanks to the Denver Decides partners, which include Enter Neighborhood Cooperation and the League of Women Voters of Denver. Denver Decides is presented by Denver 8 TV. Remember, Denver's general election takes place on Tuesday, November 5th. Be sure you are registered to vote and get out there and vote. For complete election information online, go to denverdecides.org or denver7.com/Denver Decides. Stay with us for more Denver Decides forums coming up shortly. For now, I'm Russell Haythorne with Denver 7. Thank you for joining us.